A soft shift happens in your chest the moment you realize this simple truth. You were never wandering through this universe alone, not even for a breath. There has always been something moving with you, responding to you, shaping itself around the quiet signals you send out. And the more gently you allow yourself to feel that, the more you begin to sense that reality isn't a stage you were dropped onto. It's a living field. You're interacting with every second, even when you think you're doing nothing at all. When I look into the camera and speak to you now, I'm speaking to that deeper part of you, the part that has always felt there was something more happening beneath the surface of ordinary life. Maybe you've sensed it in those moments when your thoughts almost seem to echo back to you through the world outside, or in the way a memory, a longing, or a quiet wish would ripple through your day and suddenly show up as a sign, a coincidence, a strange alignment. These are not accidents. Nothing in this universe is truly random. Everything vibrates. Everything communicates. Everything is participating in a vast, subtle choreography, and you are not outside of it. You are woven into it. Every thought you allow, every feeling you embrace or resist, every image you hold inside, they are not abstract, private events. They are frequencies. They move. They extend outward. They touch. They connect. And in a way that still surprises even the brightest minds in science, those frequencies become entangled with possibilities that already exist in the quantum field. Imagine a silent ocean of potential, stretching in all directions. In that ocean, countless versions of you are already shimmering different timelines, different outcomes, different expressions of who you could become. They are not fantasies. They are dormant realities waiting for resonance. This is the heart of quantum entanglement. As it relates to your life, the moment your inner state matches the frequency of a particular possibility, you are no longer separate from it. You and that version of reality begin to communicate instantly, like two musical strings tuned to the same note. One trembles, the other follows. Nothing stands between them. Not space, not time, not distance, just resonance. And here is where a quiet question begins to open inside you. A question that is more alive than any answer I could offer. If every future version of you already exists in this ocean of potential, what would happen if you gently shifted your frequency right now? Not with strain, not with force, but with presence, with a breath, with a subtle willingness to loosen your grip on who you think you have to be. Sometimes, the deepest transformations don't start with dramatic decisions. They begin with small internal movements, a softening in the chest, a release in the jaw, a moment where you no longer argue with life but let it flow the way rivers do when they stop fighting gravity. Your energy adjusts. Your identity becomes more fluid. And just like that, you're no longer aligning with the timeline of fear, tension, or limitation. You're tuning into something quieter, clearer, and far more powerful. As you breathe into this realization, notice what happens inside you. Notice how your nervous system responds when you tell it, gently, that it doesn't have to hold everything together. Notice how the mind loosens when it stops trying to predict every outcome. Notice how the heart lifts when it remembers that it, too, is a transmitter, an antenna that reaches far beyond the boundaries of your skin. That's the moment you begin to rejoin the field that has always been surrounding you. A field of intelligence, a field of awareness, a field that mirrors who you are being on the inside, not what you're begging for on the outside. And from that moment on, manifestation stops being a technique. It becomes a relationship, a conversation, a communion between your inner frequency and the infinite possibilities waiting to meet you. You didn't come here to chase reality like a shadow that keeps slipping out of reach. You came here to remember that you're shaping it. Continuously, through the quality of your consciousness, you came here to recognize that your thoughts are not requests, they're instructions. Your emotions are not reactions, they're broadcasts. And every image you hold inside is a message sent into the quantum field, saying, "This is the version of me I choose to entangle with." It's easy to forget this. We've been trained to believe that life happens out there, and all we can do is respond. But the truth sits quietly, just beneath that belief, waiting for the right moment to be heard. The moment when you slow down enough to feel the vibration beneath your thoughts, the moment you allow yourself to sense that you're generating more than you realize, the moment you recognize that your inner world isn't a private room, it's the control panel of your entire experience. So as you sit with me here, imagine this. Imagine that the timeline you desire most, the one where you feel more alive, more grounded, more free, is already reaching toward you. Not as a reward, not as a miracle, but as a natural consequence of resonance. You don't need to run after it. You don't need to beg for it. You simply need to tune yourself to the frequency where it already exists, like adjusting an old radio, until the static clears and the music comes through. And if you've ever wondered why certain dreams feel so familiar, so strangely possible, it's because they are. They are not fantasies. They are echoes from the version of you that's already living them. When your heart lights up with desire, it's not a sign of lack. It's a signal of recognition. A moment where your deeper self whispers, "There, that's the timeline that belongs to you." You didn't come here to learn magic tricks. You came here to remember a truth your soul has carried for lifetimes, that the energy you hold inside becomes the reality you walk into. So let this moment soften you. Let it open you. Let it remind you that no matter what you've lived through, no matter how dark or lonely the path has felt, you have never been disconnected from the field that shapes all things. You have always been entangled with something greater, something wiser, something vast enough to hold every version of you with grace. And as you breathe into that truth, feel this. You are already connected to the future you long for. You are already in conversation with it. And the moment you shift your inner frequency, that future shifts toward you. 1. Quantum entanglement. When two beings know each other beyond space, there's a quiet beauty in the way the universe weaves connections. A beauty that doesn't demand your belief, but gently reveals itself the moment you stop trying to control everything and allow yourself to feel. Quantum entanglement is one of those truths that seems almost poetic once you understand it, not because it's mysterious or mystical, but because it mirrors something deeply human, something you've experienced in your own life, even if you never had a name for it. At its heart, entanglement simply means these two entities can become so intertwined in their information, their vibration, their state of being, that what happens to one is echoed in the other, instantly, without needing to travel across space or time. And when you sit with that idea long enough, you start to realize it isn't so different from the connections that have shaped you, those moments when you sensed a loved one's sadness before they spoke a word, or when a thought of someone arrived in your mind just seconds before they reached out to you, as if your hearts were picking up the same silent signal. The universe is not cold machinery, it is resonance. When scientists describe entanglement, they often speak in equations, in probabilities, in graphs, but the lived experience of it feels much more like two musical instruments tuned to the same pitch. When one vibrates, the other responds. Not because something pushes or pulls, but because they share the same frequency at their core. There is no physical bridge between them, no messenger carrying the signal. The connection is simply there, immediate, intimate, unbroken. And when you look at yourself through that lens, you begin to see that your inner world is not sealed off within your mind the way you once assumed. Your emotions are not contained. Your thoughts are not isolated. Your intentions are not private whispers that disappear into the darkness of your skull. They ripple, they move, they extend outward into the field that surrounds you and through you, the same field that holds every possibility you will ever encounter. This is why a moment of fear can shift the entire atmosphere around you, tightening your body, closing your breath, and drawing experiences that echo that fear back into your life. This is also why a moment of genuine joy seems to brighten the world itself, making colors more vivid, conversations more gentle, and opportunities quietly gravitate toward you, as if the universe is responding to your inner shift. These reactions are not coincidences and not psychological tricks. They are the natural language of the field. When your inner state changes, your entanglement with certain realities weakens, while your entanglement with others strengthens. You begin to connect with different timelines, the same way one frequency finds resonance with another. As I speak to you now, imagine your body as an instrument that has never stopped vibrating. An instrument tuned not with strings, but with thoughts, with hopes, with memories, with beliefs that have shaped you for decades. Each belief is like a finger, pressing lightly on a string, altering the tone of your life. Some tones come from childhood, some from pain you didn't deserve, some from moments of survival that taught you to contract rather than open. These tones create a particular frequency, and that frequency becomes the blueprint of what you naturally entangle with. Not because you are broken, not because you are unworthy, but because the field always responds to the vibration you are offering, just as a second violin responds when the first one begins to sing. When you understand this, even a little, you realize that your emotions matter far more than you were taught. Not because you must constantly be positive, but because your emotions reveal the frequency you're transmitting. They show you what you are connecting to, what you are calling forward, what realities you are silently aligning with. This is why the moments when you force yourself to act strong while you feel exhausted inside rarely change anything. You're offering a surface expression built on a foundation of fear. The field doesn't respond to your mask. It responds to your core. But when you allow yourself to feel without collapsing into the feeling, when you observe your sadness, your hope, your longing, with honesty and gentleness, you start to shift the vibration beneath the emotion. That shift, small as it may seem, is enough to begin re-entangling you with different possibilities. It's like retuning an instrument that has drifted off key. You don't need to replace it or rebuild it. You simply need to bring it back into resonance with the song you truly want to play. This is why your imagination matters. Not the kind of imagination that escapes from life, but the kind that reveals life's deeper structure. When you imagine a version of yourself who is calmer, healthier, more expansive, you are not indulging in fantasy. You are initiating connection. You are sending a signal into the quantum field that says, I know this version exists. I can feel it. And the field, recognizing the frequency of that imagined self, begins to respond. It's the same way that one guitar string vibrates when another identical string is plucked nearby. No contact, no conversation, just resonance. Intention works the same way. A sincere intention is not a command you shout into the universe. It's a quiet alignment between your inner truth and the field around you. When your intention grows from clarity rather than desperation, from willingness rather than fear, you create a frequency steady enough for the field to recognize and mirror. It's never about pushing. It's never about forcing. It's about allowing your energy to settle into the vibration that matches the reality you want to meet. And perhaps the most healing realization is this: you have been entangled your entire life. Every profound moment you've experienced, the encounters that changed you, the losses that opened you, the insights that transformed you came through invisible threads of resonance long before they showed up in physical form. And as you continue breathing into this understanding, something inside you softens. You begin to see that you are not reaching across empty space, trying to summon a future from nothing. You are simply tuning yourself to what is already there. You are reconnecting with a reality that has been calling you quietly, patiently, like a distant melody, waiting for you to find the note that matches it. In this sense, entanglement is not just a scientific phenomenon. It is a reminder that you are part of something intimately connected, infinitely intelligent, and profoundly responsive to the energy you hold. You are not influencing reality from the outside. You are participating in it from the inside, shaping it with every breath, every thought, every emotional wave that moves through you. And once you feel that, not understand it intellectually, but feel it in your bones, your entire relationship with life begins to change. The world stops being a place you fear and starts becoming a field you can harmonize with. Gently, steadily, one honest vibration at a time. 2. The quantum field is a living archive, a place where every version of you is already waiting to be chosen. There is a moment, usually quiet and almost unremarkable on the surface, when a person realizes that the future is not a distant road they must struggle to walk toward, but a vast ocean of possibilities that already exist, shimmering all around them. And as strange as it sounds at first, this understanding begins to settle into the body like warm light, the kind of light that doesn't blind you, but slowly reveals the contours of a greater truth. The quantum field is not an empty space. It is not a void. It is a living archive, a sea of potential, a place where every outcome, every possibility, every you that could exist is already alive in the form of pure information. Scientists call it the field of probability. Mystics call it the infinite. But at its essence, it is simply the space where your choices, your vibrations, your identity begin to take shape. When you think of it as a vast ocean, something inside you relaxes, because oceans are familiar, deep, fluid, responsive. They shift and shimmer with the wind, the moon, the seasons. And in the same way, the quantum field responds to your internal tides. Each possibility within it is like a timeline, not rigid, not predetermined, but flexible, waiting for resonance, waiting for a match. You are not carving new rivers through solid stone. You are learning to tune yourself to the waters that already flow exactly where you want to go. Many people grow up believing that the future must be built from scratch, that they must fight for it, earn it, or chase it. And this belief weighs heavily on the heart, creating a lifetime of tension. But when you begin to understand that you do not create the future from nothing, you select it from the field by the frequency you embody, something inside begins to untangle. You stop straining against life the way a river might try to flow uphill. You stop gripping possibilities in fear of losing them. You begin to see that your true power has never been in your effort, but in your alignment. Every timeline is like a different melody, already playing somewhere in the field. Each one has its own emotional tone, its own mental atmosphere, its own structure of events. There is a timeline where you are still carrying old pain as if it were part of your identity. There is a timeline where you have outgrown the fear that once defined you. There is a timeline where love feels natural, where your body is at ease, where your mind is less noisy, where abundance doesn't feel like a battle but a state of coherence. And you don't have to build these timelines. They are already there. Your job, if it can even be called a job, is simply to feel which melody you want to join. This is why some people live their whole lives repeating the same patterns. It's not that new possibilities don't exist for them. It's that their inner frequency keeps selecting the same timeline again and again. Their thoughts broadcast a certain signal. Their emotions reinforce that signal. And the field responds by matching them to the reality that resonates with those vibrations. It's not destiny, it's entanglement. It's resonance. And the moment their internal frequency softens or shifts, even slightly, new timelines become available, gently drifting closer like ships emerging through morning fog. When I speak to you about vibration, I'm not asking you to force yourself into unnatural positivity. I'm not suggesting you pretend your pain doesn't exist or that your fear is meaningless. What I am inviting you to recognize is that your emotional landscape is a navigation tool. When you feel heavy, contracted, or hopeless, you're entangled with a timeline that reflects that vibration. When you feel open, present, curious, even quietly hopeful. You're aligning with a timeline that holds more space, more possibility, more coherence. This isn't about pretending, it's about noticing where your frequency sits, noticing what your body is telling you, noticing which version of reality begins to flow toward you when you choose even a single calmer breath. Think of this field like a massive library where every version of your future is already written, waiting on the shelves. You don't write the book from scratch. You reach for the one whose energy, whose story, whose emotional truth aligns with the vibration you carry. And as soon as you resonate with it deeply enough, that book isn't just something you read. It becomes the script your life begins to follow. There is something profoundly comforting in this. It means you are never as stuck as you think you are. Even when your circumstances feel heavy, even when your past seems to cast a long shadow, there are always other timelines around you, quietly humming with different outcomes, différentes émotions, different experience. And the moment you shift your internal state not by force, but by softening, by breathing, by allowing you begin to harmonize with those alternate realities, they stop being distant. They begin to feel familiar, almost like memories from a life you haven't lived yet, but somehow recognize. This is why, at times, you may feel an inexplicable pull toward a future that seems irrationally real. It's because you are already touching it vibrationally. It's because the version of you living that timeline is reaching back, inviting you into alignment. And the field listens. It adjusts. It responds to your willingness to choose. So when I tell you, you do not create the future. You choose it by your vibration. I'm not giving you a metaphor. I'm describing the architecture of the field. You choose with the way you breathe, with the way you soften, with the beliefs you hold on to and those you release, with the way you speak to yourself when no one is listening. Every gentle shift in your internal climate recalibrates your entanglement with the timelines around you. This is why presence matters so deeply. When you are present, truly present, you step out of the momentum of old timelines. You stop feeding them with your fear. You stop reinforcing them with recycled thoughts. Presence is like a pause between musical notes where you can retune your entire instrument. In that pause, the timeline you choose becomes clearer. The field begins to organize itself around your new frequency. Life rearranges, often quietly at first, then unmistakably. And what's remarkable is that you don't need to know how the timeline will unfold. You don't need to see the details. You simply need to feel the resonance and trust that the field will take care of the rest. The quantum field doesn't require effort. It requires coherence. It doesn't require control. It requires permission. The timelines are already there. The ocean is already waiting. And each moment, you shift the way you hold yourself in thought, in emotion. In breath, you step a little more fully into the version of reality that has been waiting for you with patience, with clarity, and with quiet love. 3. Identity field. The field of who you are determines which possibility you become entangled with. There comes a point on the inner journey when you finally understand why so much effort, so many affirmations, so many desperate attempts to manifest a different life never truly took root. It isn't because you were doing something wrong, or because the universe was withholding something from you. It's because reality never responds to what you want. It responds to who you are being. Your identity, the quiet, invisible field of assumptions you carry about yourself, is the true signal the universe listens to, and it speaks far more loudly than your wishes ever could. Neville Goddard understood this with astonishing clarity when he said, "You are already what you seek," not as a poetic idea, but as a description of how the quantum field operates. In the realm of vibration, you cannot ask for one thing while embodying another. You cannot long for abundance while identifying as someone who is always lacking. You cannot pray for love while living as someone unworthy of receiving it. The field does not judge you for this, nor does it punish you. It simply mirrors you. It reflects the frequency of the version of yourself you have accepted as real. Identity is not the personality you display to others, nor the roles you play, nor the stories you repeat when someone asks about your life. Identity is much quieter than that. It is the baseline vibration beneath your actions, the emotional posture you return to when the world becomes silent. It is the collection of beliefs, habits of thought, and deep assumptions you have rehearsed for years, often unconsciously, until they feel like the truth. And because identity radiates continuously, even when you say nothing and do nothing, it becomes the tuning fork that selects your timeline. When you carry an identity shaped by old wounds, life cannot help but echo those wounds back to you, not as cruelty but as resonance. When you live from a sense of limitation, the world seems to narrow. When you live from a sense of fear, the world takes on a threatening shape. And when you live from the identity of someone always waiting for permission, life arranges itself so that permission never quite arrives. These patterns are not fate, they are frequency. And yet, the moment you begin to soften the identity you have been clinging to, the moment you realize that you are not your survival patterns, not your past roles, not your outdated self-image, a subtle light enters the system. You stop gripping the old version of you that has been choosing your timeline by default. You begin to sense that there is another version of yourself, one that exists, not as fantasy but as a vibrational reality, already alive within the quantum field. This version is not somewhere far away. It is simply waiting for you to tune your identity toward it. Changing your identity is not about pretending. It is not about forcing yourself into artificial confidence or reciting affirmations that don't resonate with your truth. Real identity transformation happens the way dawn arrives, gradually at first, then unmistakably. As the light begins to reveal what was always there, you start by noticing the thoughts that no longer feel like home. You begin to question the emotional habits you once accepted as permanent. You observe the old stories that tighten your chest, the ones that whisper, "This is who you are," even though a deeper part of you knows you've outgrown them. As this awareness grows, the identity field begins to recalibrate. You stop identifying with the old timeline, and the old timeline stops identifying with you. The resonance weakens, the entanglement loosens, and suddenly, new versions of reality versions that once felt distant or impossible begin to drift closer, responding to your internal shift, the way a school of fish moves in harmony with the current. This is the quiet miracle of shifting your identity. Your outer world rearranges itself without force, without struggle, without pushing. There is no need to chase or grasp. You don't beg the universe for change. You allow change by becoming someone the new timeline can recognize. Reality is not withholding anything. It is waiting for coherence. And coherence happens when your inner state matches the identity of the version of yourself you are reaching toward. Imagine standing in front of a vast mirror that doesn't reflect your appearance but your vibration. This mirror shows the you who lives on different timelines, the you who is at peace, the you who is courageous, the you who is abundant, the you who is deeply loved. When you look into this mirror from a place of lack, those versions remain faint and distant because you cannot see them clearly. But when you embrace even the smallest shift toward the identity you desire, the reflection begins to sharpen. You begin to see yourself not through the lens of your past, but through the frequency of your becoming. Identity change is subtle but profound. You feel it when you respond differently to a trigger that once controlled you. You feel it when your inner voice becomes a little kinder, a little steadier, a little less frantic. You feel it when hope doesn't feel like denial, but like memory, as if the future you're shifting into is not being created, but being remembered. And the field, sensitive and responsive, feels this recognition. It senses the new vibrational pattern forming within you and begins to reorganize events, people, and opportunities to match it. This is why identity is the gateway to every timeline you will ever experience. You cannot access a future you are unwilling to become. And you cannot keep living as the old self while expecting the new timeline to arrive. The field mirrors your core, not your longing. It matches your being, not your effort. And the moment your identity shifts even slightly, the entire field responds instantly, because entanglement does not require time. When you change your inner frequency, you stop vibrating with the old version of reality and begin resonating with a new one. One breath, one thought, one act of gentle self-recognition is enough to begin dissolving the old timeline and aligning with the one that has been calling you quietly from the depths of the field. You are already what you seek, not because you have fully embodied it yet, but because the identity of that version already exists in the quantum field, already vibrating, already reachable. The journey is not about becoming something foreign. It is about remembering the version of yourself that has always been waiting beyond fear, beyond habit, beyond survival. And as you open to this truth with tenderness rather than pressure, your identity softens, expands, and finally settles into a frequency the universe has no choice but to mirror. This is the moment the timeline shifts, not with fireworks, but with coherence, not with force, but with recognition, not with striving, but with becoming. 4. Quantum shifting. It isn't about jumping into a new reality, but about changing the one who is observing. There is a gentle truth that begins to reveal itself only after you've exhausted every attempt to force life into the shape you wanted. You spend years trying to control, trying to predict, trying to push your way into a better existence. And somewhere along that long, weary road, a quiet realization arrives. Reality does not bend because you wrestle with it. It bends because you soften into a different state of being. Quantum shifting is often misunderstood as some dramatic leap from one universe to another, as if you must rip yourself out of your current life and hurl your consciousness into a brighter, more desirable future. But those who have truly walked through inner darkness and come out with a deeper understanding know that shifting is never a violent act. It is a dissolution, a melting, a gentle surrender of the observer you once were. Eckhart Tolle speaks of presence not as a skill to master, but as a doorway to an entirely different dimension of perception. And it is through that doorway, not through force, not through desperate longing, that quantum shifting becomes possible. Presence is not simply being in the moment. Presence is the release of the compulsive mind that tries to interpret, judge, and reshape the world through the lens of old pain. Presence is what remains when the noise of your past identities softens, when your nervous system no longer clings to survival mode patterns, when the world is no longer filtered through fear, scarcity, or self-defense. When presence deepens, the observer changes. And when the observer changes, the observed reality cannot remain the same. Quantum shifting is nothing more and nothing less than the reconfiguration of the structure of your consciousness. It is the moment you stop relating to life from the identity of the one who suffered, the one who lacked, the one who felt unworthy of receiving. It is the moment you stop matching the frequency of your wounds and begin matching the frequency of your truth. Not because you convinced yourself of it, but because you allowed yourself to step out of the psychological fog long enough to remember what has always been underneath. A shift in consciousness does not require effort. It requires honesty. It requires noticing the places inside you that have been clenched for decades, the shoulders that never fully relax, the breath that stays shallow without reason, the thoughts that spin as if they're trying to protect you from a danger that no longer exists. When you recognize these habits, not as you, but as conditioned responses of the old observer, the structure of your consciousness loosens, something in you opens, something unclenches, something old begins to fall away. And in that falling away, the shift begins. Reality does not change because you command it. Reality changes because the one who is looking at it is no longer the same. The field responds to your state of being, not your demands. Shifting is not a jump, it's a tuning. It's not teleportation, it's resonance. It's not escaping your life, it's entering it fully for the first time without the filter of fear. When your state of presence deepens, subtle things begin to happen. The same conversations feel different. The same rooms hold a softer atmosphere. The same challenges feel less threatening, as if the world has stopped pressing on your chest and started expanding around you. People respond to you differently, without understanding why. Opportunities you once overlooked now appear. Synchronicities arise, not as magical events, but as natural consequences of an observer who is no longer vibrating at the frequency of confusion or contraction. This is what it means to shift to become the version of you who sees clearly, breathes fully, and responds from awareness rather than reflex. When you shift your consciousness, you shift the reality you entangle with, not because reality changed first, but because you did. The old timeline loses its grip on you because it no longer matches your state of being. The thoughts that once formed your identity now feel foreign, as if they belong to someone you used to be. The emotions that once dominated your days now pass through you without anchoring into your nervous system. It's not escape, it's liberation. And liberation is always an internal event long before it becomes an external one. You begin noticing that you are no longer the person who sees the world through a lens of scarcity or fear. You notice that your mind no longer spirals into old narratives when discomfort arises. You notice that your reactions are slower, softer, more deliberate, as if a spaciousness has opened inside you and is guiding your movements with a quieter intelligence. This spaciousness is the essence of quantum shifting. It is the collapse of the old observer, the one entangled with old timelines, old pain, old energies. As soon as you stop feeding that observer with your attention, its timeline dissolves. And what remains is a new vantage point, a consciousness capable of entangling with possibilities that were always there but invisible to your previous state. People often ask how to shift into a new reality, but the question itself is born from misunderstanding. You cannot shift into a new reality while holding on to the consciousness that created the old one. You cannot drag your old self into a new timeline. You must release it. The way a tree releases its leaves in autumn, not as an act of effort, but as an act of nature, an act of alignment with a deeper truth. Once you let go of who you were, the reality attached to that identity loosens its hold, like a tide drawing back from the shore. You do not push the tide. You simply stop resisting the pull. And then the world around you begins to reorganize. Shifting happens when the observer becomes coherent, when the thoughts, emotions, body, and breath all align into a single frequency of presence. When the chaos inside you quiets enough for the field to reflect a new pattern, this coherence is what people often mistake for manifestation. They think they created something new. But what actually happened is that they finally resonated with a timeline that had been available to them all along. They simply weren't in a matching state to perceive it. So quantum shifting is not dramatic. It is intimate. It is the slow returning of your awareness to the truth that the world you see is a projection of the consciousness you are looking from. Change the lens, and the landscape changes. Change the observer, and the observed reality reorganizes in response. The shift is never in the world, it is in you. And once you feel that, once you breathe it in deeply enough that your nervous system begins to believe it, you'll realize that every timeline is already here, quietly waiting. And your only task is to become the version of yourself who can finally see the one that has always been calling your name. 5. When emotion becomes the command you send into the field, you are programming reality even when you don't realize it. There is a quiet moment on the path of awakening when you finally understand that life has never been responding to your words, your plans, or even your wishes. It has been responding to your emotional vibration all along. Abraham Hicks often says, "Emotion is your frequency indicator." And those words carry a depth that only truly reveals itself when you start watching your own life with gentler, more attentive eyes. Because when you begin to notice the way your inner state ripples outward into your circumstances, you start to see that emotion is not something that happens inside you. It is something you broadcast. It is a message, a signature, a command sent directly into the quantum field. Whether you are conscious of it or not, many of us grew up believing that our emotions were private, contained, something we needed to manage or hide or suppress. Yet from the perspective of both metaphysics and science, emotion is not silent. Emotion is energy moving through the body. And energy does not stay still. It expands. It radiates. It influences. Your heart, quite literally, generates an electromagnetic field that extends several feet beyond your physical body. And this field pulsates with the frequency of your emotional state. When you feel fear, that field contracts and becomes chaotic. When you feel gratitude, it becomes coherent, steady, harmonious. The coherence or incoherence of that emotional field is the data you are continuously sending into your environment. And the quantum field responds to it, the way a still pond responds to the stone you throw into it, through ripples that shape everything that touches them. You may not be aware of what you are broadcasting, but the universe is. You may not understand the language of your own emotional waves, but the field does. You may tell yourself, "I'm fine," while your heart broadcasts a frequency of despair. And life will respond to the despair, not the words. Reality listens to the vibration beneath your thoughts, beneath your posture, beneath your breath. In this sense, you are always manifesting, always transmitting, always engaging with the quantum field, not because you are trying to, but because you cannot turn off the signal of your emotional body any more than a star can turn off its light. And when you begin to see this, not as a burden, but as a profound source of power, something inside you softens, because you realize that life is not ignoring you, it is mirroring you. It is not resisting you. It is reflecting your inner atmosphere with a precision so perfect that it becomes almost humbling. Many people try to manifest from a place of mental repetition, repeating statements, visualizing outcomes, writing affirmations, yet their emotional field is broadcasting a different frequency, often one of fear, scarcity, or doubt. And the universe responds to that deeper emotional broadcast, not the surface-level intention. It is like trying to whisper a new command while shouting an old one. The field hears the shout. Your emotional state is always the louder signal. This is not something to fear, it is something to understand. Because once you realize that emotion is the true command, you begin to take your inner life more seriously, not in a heavy way, but in a loving way. You start to treat your emotions not as obstacles but as guidance. You notice the subtle tightening in your chest when you drift into worry. You notice the way your breath changes when you feel safe. You notice how your body expands when you choose a thought that feels slightly better. These shifts are not trivial. They are the recalibration of your frequency. And each small adjustment sends a new instruction into the field. Emotion is not random. Emotion is not weakness. Emotion is the interface between your consciousness and the quantum field. It tells you whether you are in resonance with the timeline you desire, or entangled with one you no longer want. When your emotion feels heavy, it is not punishing you, it is informing you that your vibration is harmonizing with a timeline that does not serve you. When your emotion feels light and expansive, it is showing you that you are entering coherence with a version of reality that is aligned with your deeper truth. You do not need to analyze or judge these sensations. You simply need to listen. When you listen long enough, you realize that your emotions have been speaking the language of the universe to you your entire life. And even more transformative, is the understanding that you never stop emitting, even in your sleep. Your energy field dances. Even in silence, you are speaking. Even when you are tired, confused, or lost, the frequency you hold becomes an invitation to the timelines that match it. And the field, unconditional and responsive, accepts that invitation every single time. This means that the work of manifestation is not about forcing your mind into a perfect vision. It is about soothing your emotional field into coherence. When your emotions soften, your frequency shifts. When your frequency shifts, your timeline shifts. You begin to select different possibilities, not through effort, but through resonance. This is why healing feels like clarity. This is why forgiveness feels like space. This is why gratitude feels like alignment. These emotional states are not moral achievements. They are vibrational recalibrations that tune you to a timeline where life feels easier, where you are not dragging the weight of old pain through your present moment. And the universe, sensitive to every shift in your field, rearranges itself around your new coherence. You do not need to force outcomes when your emotional field is aligned. The field knows. The field listens. The field responds to the signal you cannot help but send. There will be days when your emotions feel overwhelming, when old fear rises like a tide, when sadness sits heavily in your chest. These moments are not failures. They are invitations, reminders that your emotional field is asking for presence, not avoidance. When you sit with your emotion gently, without trying to fix it or judge it, the field of your heart becomes more coherent. Even in your sadness, coherence does not require joy. It requires honesty. It requires softness. It requires breathing with what is real. And that truth, the ability to be with yourself without resistance, sends a signal into the field more powerful than any affirmation ever could. As someone who has walked through long stretches of darkness, I can tell you with sincerity that your emotional field has been guiding you toward alignment, even in the moments you thought you were lost. Every emotional pain was showing you what frequency you were entangled with. Every moment of relief was showing you what was possible, and every time your heart softened, even for a second, the universe leaned toward you, adjusting the pathways of your life in ways you could not see. You have been in communication with the quantum field your entire life, and now you are beginning to understand the language you've been speaking all along. 6. Entanglement and shifting operate through frequency matching points. There is a certain tenderness in realizing that life has never been a random sequence of events, but a continuous dance of resonance, a quiet choreography of frequencies meeting, aligning, and recognizing one another across the vastness of the quantum field. And the deeper you walk into your own healing, the more you begin to notice that nothing in your experience arrives without a vibrational invitation. Every possibility in the quantum field carries what can only be described as its own vibrational signature, a kind of energetic fingerprint that exists long before it becomes physical, long before it turns into circumstance, opportunity, or relationship. These signatures are not mystical. They are simply the natural frequencies of different timelines, different outcomes, different versions of you. And when your inner vibration, your thoughts, your emotions, your sense of identity begins to match one of these signatures, something subtle but unmistakable happens. You fall into alignment with that timeline, not because you chased it, but because you harmonized with it. Matching frequency with a possibility is like stepping into a river that has been flowing beside you for years, waiting for the moment when your own current softens enough to merge with it. And in that moment of merging, the river recognizes you. It welcomes you because your vibration has become familiar to it. Many people imagine shifting realities as jumping from one world to another. But the truth is much gentler than that. You do not leap between timelines. You slide into them through coherence. Your vibration meets the vibration of a possibility, and the two lock into resonance like tuning forks, humming the same note. As soon as that match occurs, you begin experiencing the timeline associated with that frequency. It does not suddenly appear, it simply becomes perceivable. It becomes the reality you can feel, sense, attract, and eventually walk into. This matching point, the moment your inner state synchronizes with an outer possibility, is what truly creates a shift. And it is always preceded by an internal moment of openness, clarity, or sûreté. And this is where synchronicities enter the story. Many people misunderstand synchronicities as supernatural signs, as if the universe is sending coded messages to guide them. But what actually happens is even more beautiful. Synchronicities are frequency alignment events. They appear when your energy has moved close enough to a new timeline that the edges of that timeline begin to brush against your current experience. It is like seeing the shoreline of a new land before your boat fully arrives there. You catch glimpses of the reality you are aligning with, numbers repeating at the right moment, conversations that mirror your thoughts, opportunities appearing in improbable ways, someone saying exactly the thing you needed to hear. These are not coincidences. They are points of intersection between your current frequency and the signature of the timeline you are moving into. Consider this: when you tune a radio, you do not create the station. You simply adjust your frequency until the station's signal becomes clear. Before you reach the exact frequency, you sometimes catch fragments of faint melody, a distant voice, a flicker of sound signs that you are nearing resonance. Synchronicities work the same way. They are those fragments, those flickers, those little pieces of the timeline responding to you, because your vibration is brushing against its frequency. The more coherent your inner state becomes, the more frequent and undeniable these synchronicities grow. And when you fully match the timeline signature, synchronicities stop being signs, they become your normal life. This is why the universe feels alive when you are aligned. It's not that life suddenly starts communicating with you. It's that you have finally tuned into the part of the field that has always been communicating. Your mind becomes clearer. Your heart becomes softer. Your choices feel guided not by force, but by an inner compass that pulls you toward what already belongs to you. The timeline is not ahead of you. It meets you the moment your vibration becomes a match. But frequency matching is not something you achieve by effort or willpower. It is something you allow by becoming less fragmented inside. Every fear, every old belief, every survival pattern vibrates at a particular frequency, usually one that keeps you entangled with timelines of limitation or stagnation. When you try to manifest from that fragmented frequency, you cannot lock into the timelines that carry higher coherence. It's like trying to tune into a clear radio signal while clinging tightly to static. You must first release the noise, not by fighting it, but by observing it with gentleness. Healing is not about fixing yourself. It's about returning to coherence. And coherence naturally moves you toward the timelines that reflect your wholeness. Frequency matching happens in moments when you least expect it, when your breath deepens, when your nervous system relaxes, when a heavy belief dissolves, when an old story loses its power over you. These moments may feel small on the surface, but they cause enormous ripples in the quantum field. A single moment of genuine self-acceptance can bring you closer to a timeline of abundance. A single moment of forgiveness can shift you onto a timeline of relational harmony. A single moment of presence can detach you from a timeline rooted in past pain. The shift is never loud. It is never theatrical. It is always subtle, quiet, and deeply intimate. And once you cross that frequency threshold, the point where your internal state aligns with the vibrational signature of a new possibility, life begins to reorganize at a pace that feels almost uncanny. People appear, opportunities arrive, conversations unfold with impossible timing, resources show up right when they're needed, and you feel something inside you whisper, "This is the new timeline greeting you." Synchronicities become confirmations not because you need reassurance, but because the universe is mirroring your coherence with an elegance that feels almost tender. In the end, Frequency matching is simply the universe's way of saying, you are ready. And the moment you are ready, truly ready in your vibration, the timeline you long for stops being a dream and becomes the inevitable next chapter of your lived experience. 7. Reprogramming the energy field through imagination and deep presence. There is a kind of stillness you reach only after life has stripped away every illusion you once leaned on. A stillness not born from comfort, but from the quiet truth that nothing outside you can restore what you have lost inside. And from that stillness, something remarkable often begins to unfold. You discover that the most powerful tools you possess are not force, intellect, or strategy, but imagination and presence. Neville Goddard understood this with a clarity that continues to echo through generations when he said, "Imaginal act is a creative act." He wasn't speaking metaphorically. He meant that the moment you imagine an experience with sincerity and depth, you are engaging with it vibrationally, calling it into coherence, selecting its timeline from the quantum field. Imagination, in this sense, is not escapism. It is participation. It is alignment with a possibility that already exists in the field, waiting for your consciousness to become a match. When you imagine from a place of genuine feeling the warmth of the outcome, the ease that accompanies it, the relief that flows through your chest, you are not creating something new. You are downloading a version of reality that is already alive in potential form. Your imagination becomes the doorway, the bridge, the vibrational handshake between your current state and the timeline you wish to enter. But imagination alone cannot reprogram your field if the rest of your being is drenched in resistance. This is where presence becomes essential. Deep presence, the quality Eckhart Tolle speaks of with such grounded simplicity, is the dissolving of inner noise, the quieting of the mind's habitual tension, the softening of the emotional friction you have carried for years without noticing. Presence removes the static from your frequency. It reduces the pushback your nervous system has developed out of fear, survival, trauma, or old identity structures. When you become present, you stop rehearsing yesterday's pain. You stop projecting tomorrow's worries. You stop feeding the old timeline with your attention. Presence is not passive. It is deeply active in a way the mind cannot comprehend. It creates space. It dissolves resistance. It brings you into coherence, which is the exact vibrational state the field responds to. Presence is like wiping the dust off a mirror. Suddenly, you can see clearly what has always been there. And something extraordinary happens when imagination and presence meet. Imagination gives shape to the new timeline, while presence gives silence for the vibration to settle into your field. Imagination downloads the possibility. Presence stabilizes it. Imagination opens the door. Presence allows you to step through. When these two merge, your energy field begins to reprogram itself without struggle, without strain, without the frantic attempts to make life happen that once exhausted you. You begin to vibrate with a clarity that the quantum field cannot ignore. Your inner world becomes a coherent signal rather than a confused mixture of longing and fear. And because reality mirrors the signal you broadcast, the field reorganizes itself to match your new coherence. To understand this more deeply, imagine a musician tuning their instrument. Imagination is the musician hearing the melody they want to play. Presence is the stillness required to tune each string patiently, listening for the slightest mismatch. If you rush the tuning, the melody will be distorted. If you only imagine the melody without adjusting the instrument, the music will never leave your mind. But when you hold the melody in your heart and tune each string with calm precision, the song emerges effortlessly, as if it had always been waiting for you. This is how your energy field works. Imagination provides the blueprint. Presence makes your nervous system capable of sustaining the vibration of that blueprint without collapsing into old habits. Most people imagine their desires but do so through the filter of their old identity. They imagine abundance while feeling unworthy. They imagine love while fearing abandonment. They imagine peace while carrying unresolved chaos. And because the emotional frequency contradicts the imagined scene, the field receives mixed signals, creating incoherent manifestations. Nothing sticks, nothing stabilizes, nothing fully arrives. This is why deep presence is crucial. It removes the internal static that distorts the frequency of your imagination. Presence neutralizes the emotional charge of the old self, giving the new timeline a place to root within you. As someone who has walked through long, shadowed corridors of fear and loss, I know that imagination can feel impossible when your body is heavy with survival mode. But that heaviness is not a barrier. It is simply a sign that presence must come first. Sometimes you cannot imagine clearly because your nervous system has not yet felt safe enough to dream. In those moments, presence becomes the medicine. Sitting with your breath, noticing the tight places in your chest, allowing the trembling emotions to soften. Each of these small acts begins to restore coherence. And when coherence returns, imagination becomes natural again. Not a forced practice, but an organic extension of your inner peace. When your presence deepens, your imagined reality becomes more vivid, more believable, more embodied. You begin to feel the timeline within your heart, not as a fantasy, but as a memory you are re-entering. And the quantum field responds to this embodiment. It recognizes the signal, not as a wish, but as an identity. And what is recognized vibrationally must eventually appear. Physically, it may begin as small shifts, a new insight, a gentle opportunity, a synchronicity that feels almost too precise to ignore. But those small shifts are the first signs of reprogramming. They are the early echoes of a timeline you have begun to entangle with. And the more consistently you hold the imagined state in the quiet space of your presence, the stronger the entanglement becomes. Reprogramming your energy field is not a dramatic event. It does not require rituals, ceremonies, or intense exertion. It is the natural consequence of combining the creative power of your imagination with the stabilizing power of your awareness. When you imagine with feeling and witness without resistance, the field adjusts itself, the way a river adjusts to a shift in the earth beneath it naturally. Inevitably, gracefully, life begins to flow toward the version of yourself you have allowed. The old timeline weakens, not because you rejected it, but because it no longer resonates with the person you have become. And without even realizing it, you step into the new reality you once thought was unreachable. Presence opens the space. Imagination fills the space. Together they create a frequency the universe cannot help but mirror. And when the field mirrors you, your world becomes the reflection of a consciousness that has finally remembered its creative nature, not through force, but through coherence, not through effort, but through becoming. 8. Surrender the quiet condition that allows you to connect with a new timeline. There comes a point in every inner journey when you realize that no amount of pushing, forcing, or strategizing can carry you into the life you long for. You reach a kind of exhaustion, not the kind that weakens you, but the kind that strips away the illusions you once clung to. And in that stripped-down place, the truth becomes almost painfully clear. You cannot shift into a new timeline while gripping the energy of the old one. Letting go is not a poetic idea. It is the vibrational requirement for transition. If you do not release the frequency of who you once were, you cannot attune to who you are becoming. It's that simple and that difficult. Many people misunderstand surrender, thinking it means giving up, losing momentum, or abandoning hope. But surrender is not collapse. It is spaciousness. It is the moment you stop gripping your old identity with trembling hands and allow yourself to unclench, even if only slightly. Surrender, Eckhart Tolle reminds us, is the end of resistance. And resistance is what keeps you bound to the past. Every moment of emotional tension, every reflexive fear, every internal battle you wage against. What is? These are the vibrations that keep you entangled with the timeline you are trying to leave behind. When you resist, you anchor yourself to the old version of reality. When you soften, the anchor lifts. This softening is not abstract. You feel it in your body first. The exhale you didn't realize you were holding. The subtle loosening of your shoulders. The slowing of your heartbeat as your nervous system recognizes that it no longer needs to fight. In these quiet somatic shifts, a new frequency begins to rise. And that frequency is what allows the new timeline to approach you. Letting go is not a mental decision. It is an energetic release. It is the moment you stop rehearsing the story of who you've been and allow the possibility of who you can become to emerge from behind the noise. So many people stay trapped in old timelines, not because their future is blocked, but because they cannot stop gripping their past identity. The one who was hurt, the one who was overlooked, the one who was unworthy, the one who had to fight for everything. These versions of self are familiar, painfully familiar, and familiarity creates its own gravity. But no matter how much these identities once protected you, they cannot guide you into a greater timeline. The vibration of fear cannot lead you to expansion. The vibration of survival cannot lead you to creation. The vibration of clinging cannot lead you to coherence. Surrender is the moment you whisper to yourself, "I don't have to hold this anymore." It does not mean the pain disappears instantly. It does not mean the old timeline evaporates. It simply means you are no longer feeding it with resistance. You are no longer pushing against life from the tightness of your chest. You are no longer repeating the emotional habits that kept your vibration tied to the past. And something extraordinary happens when you stop pushing. The field begins to reorganize. Not because it suddenly becomes generous, but because you are no longer disrupting your own resonance. Surrender is a vibrational reset. It clears the static. It dissolves the friction. It opens the channel between you and the timeline that has been waiting for you, often for years. The new timeline cannot connect to you as long as you are energetically tangled in the old one. When you hold on, your frequency remains patterned by old beliefs, old fears, old memories. When you release, your field becomes lighter, clearer, more permeable, and in that clarity, alignment becomes possible. You begin to match the frequency of a reality where peace is available, where love feels safe, where abundance is natural, where possibilities flow effortlessly toward you instead of away from you. Letting go does not require a perfect mind or a quiet heart. It requires honesty. It requires recognizing the ways you cling to old stories, to old wounds, to old rhythms of thought, and gently loosening your grip. Even a small loosening creates space. And space is what allows the new timeline to enter. When your energy softens, synchronicities find you more easily. Opportunities approach without you chasing them. People who vibrate with your new frequency begin to appear. Your external reality shifts not because you forced it, but because you stopped interfering with the natural intelligence of the field. If you pay attention, you'll notice that surrender often arrives in moments where your mind has exhausted itself. When the strategies stop working, when the planning collapses, when the effort feels hollow, and in that moment of deep honesty, the heart finally takes over. You realize that the old way of living cannot carry you further. You stop being the person who grips life and start becoming the person who receives it. And receiving is the essence of shifting. There is a profound tenderness in letting go, because it requires trusting something you cannot see yet. It requires stepping out of the tight armor that once protected you and into the softness of your deeper self. It requires believing that life will rise to meet you when you stop trying to control its every movement. But here is what experience teaches you when you let go sincerely. Not as a technique, but as a truth. The universe always responds. Doors open that you didn't know existed. The atmosphere around you becomes lighter. People who once drained you fall away naturally. and your inner world begins to feel like a place where new realities can finally take root. Surrender is not a single act. It is a state of being. It is the steady, moment-by-moment, choice to release the vibration of the past and allow the vibration of possibility to enter. And as you practice this gently, compassionately, without rushing, you will begin to feel the timeline shift inside you, long before it shifts outside. The field feels the openness. The field feels the coherence. The field feels your readiness. And when you stop holding on to who you were, life can finally guide you into who you were always meant to become. 9. Quantum shifting happens when you step into the new version of yourself naturally. There is a certain tenderness in understanding that the reality you long for cannot arrive while you continue to live as the version of yourself who belongs to the old one. It's a truth that reveals itself slowly, often after years of waiting for life to change, first waiting for the right opportunity, the right timing, the right sign. But the deeper you walk into your own awareness, the more clearly you see that reality never makes the first move. You do. The shift begins with you, not with the world. And quantum shifting, at its core, is the moment you stop asking life to change and begin embodying the version of yourself who already lives in the reality you want to enter. You don't wait for circumstances to soften your fears before you embody courage. You don't wait for abundance to heal your sense of lack before you become someone who feels worthy of receiving. You don't wait for love to erase your wounds before you open your heart just a little wider. You become the version of yourself who belongs to the timeline you desire, and the universe rearranges itself in response. This is not arrogance. It is not delusion. It is vibrational alignment. The field does not respond to your longing. It responds to your state of being. When you step into a new identity not through force, but through sincerity, the field recognizes you, and the reality that matches that identity begins to assemble around you, often in ways that feel too seamless to be coincidence. Think of it like turning an old radio dial. You don't wait for the station to tune itself to you. You adjust the dial, and with just one small movement, a world of sound changes, static dissolves, voices appear. Music flows from a place that felt unreachable only seconds before. The station was always there. It simply needed you to match its frequency. Quantum shifting works exactly the same way. You don't leap between realities. You tune yourself, and reality responds by revealing what was already available but inaccessible to your previous state. Stepping into the new version of yourself is not pretending. It's not faking confidence or forcing positivity. It is the gentle act of aligning with a deeper truth that has been calling you for far longer than you realize. You feel this truth not in your thoughts, but in the quiet spaces beneath them, the places where your heart softens enough to admit what it truly wants, the places where your breath deepens, as if recognizing a version of yourself you have not yet lived. When you begin acting as if, in the way Neville taught, you aren't performing, you are remembering. You are borrowing the vibration of your future self long enough for it to become your present one. And there is no pressure in this process. You don't leap from one identity to another overnight. You ease into it the way dawn eases into morning, slowly, delicately, with just enough light for you to see the path ahead. One small decision, one softer thought, one moment of choosing faith instead of fear, clarity instead of noise, expansion instead of contraction. Each tiny shift accumulates, reshaping your vibrational structure until the new identity feels less like something you are reaching for and more like something you are returning to. It becomes natural, organic, familiar. Even, this naturalness is the key. Quantum shifting does not thrive in strain. The new identity cannot take root in a mind that is forcing itself to change, but it flourishes in a nervous system that feels safe enough to allow gentle transformation. You become the new version not by obsessively repeating affirmations, but by noticing the places where the old self is still gripping and choosing with tenderness not to grip anymore. You become the new version by responding differently in moments where you would once have collapsed into fear. You become the new version by holding yourself with compassion instead of judgment. You become the new version by walking through life with a subtle remembrance that who you once were no longer defines you. And as this new identity begins to settle into your body, your thoughts shift with less effort. Your emotions follow with more ease. Your behaviors emerge from a deeper clarity. You stop rehearsing the story of the old self because it simply no longer feels like your truth. And the timeline that once felt distant begins to move toward you, sometimes quietly, sometimes all at once, as if rushing to greet the version of you who has finally become capable of receiving it. This is the paradox that only experience can teach you. You change first, and then life changes. Not because you manipulate the world into giving you what you want, but because the world is a mirror, and mirrors must reflect the one standing before them. When you shift internally, reality has no choice but to rearrange itself around your new vibration. The people who no longer resonate drift away. The opportunities that once avoided you begin to approach. The synchronicities multiply until they become impossible to ignore. And your path, once tangled and dim, begins to open in front of you with a clarity that feels both surprising and inevitable. Quantum shifting is not a technique. It is a becoming. It is the moment when you stop trying to drag your old self into a new life and instead allow your new self to arise naturally from within you. And as you embody that new vibration gently, steadily, honestly, the timeline that matches it opens like a doorway you were always meant to walk through. Because reality is not waiting for proof, it is waiting for resonance. And resonance happens the moment you stop living as who you were and begin breathing, thinking, and choosing as the version of yourself who was always written into your future. The shift is not in the world. The shift is in you. And once it happens in you, the world has no choice but to follow. 10. Signs that you have successfully recalibrated your energy field. There arrives a moment in every deep inner transformation when you realize, often with quiet surprise, that something fundamental within you has shifted long before the world reflects it back. It happens subtly, like the way dawn touches the edges of a dark room before the sun has even risen. You begin to sense that you are no longer vibrating with the heaviness that once dictated your choices, your fears, your patterns, and without announcing itself, the new timeline starts weaving its way into your life through unmistakable signs that your field has changed, that your energy has softened, that your inner frequency is no longer echoing the past, but harmonizing with a version of reality you once believed was beyond your reach. One of the first signs is the sudden appearance of synchronicities, not as rare events, but as a steady rhythm, like footprints appearing at the exact moment you take a step into the unknown. These synchronicities come in forms both small and profound numbers, repeating at moments when you need reassurance, conversations that echo your unspoken thoughts, opportunities that seem to arise from places you cannot logically trace. They feel like the universe leaning closer, whispering, "Yes, keep going. You are aligned." But the truth beneath synchronicity is even simpler. What you call a sign is merely the external evidence that your frequency is brushing against the edges of a new timeline. You are entering resonance with possibilities that were always there, waiting for your field to become coherent enough to perceive them. Synchronicities thicken when you stop gripping your old identity. When resistance dissolves, when your system becomes open enough to receive rather than control, you begin to feel guided not by effort but by alignment. And with that guidance comes another unmistakable sign, a lightness in your chest, a sense of inner spaciousness where there was once pressure, tension, and constant internal conflict. This lightness is not euphoria, it is peace. A quiet peace that holds you the way warm water holds a tired body. It is the peace that comes when you no longer fight life, when you no longer argue with the present moment, When your nervous system stops rehearsing old fears and begins trusting the intelligence of the field, this absence of internal struggle does not mean you will never feel pain or confusion. But it means the pain no longer defines you, and the confusion no longer threatens you. There is a softness around your experience, a sense that you can breathe through what once felt unbearable. You notice that emotional waves pass through you more quickly, not because you suppress them, but because you no longer cling to the story behind them. You no longer chase certainty. You no longer need control. You begin to allow life to move through you. And in that allowing, you feel a weight. Lift a weight you carried for so long, you forgot it wasn't part of you. Then, almost imperceptibly, something strange, yet deeply comforting begins to happen. You feel familiar with experiences you have never lived before. You walk into a room and feel like you've already been there. You start a new project and it feels like remembering, not creating. You meet someone and feel as though you already knew them. This familiarity is not a psychological trick. It is a vibrational memory, a recognition that your energy has already touched this timeline before your body physically entered it. Your field arrives first. Your intuition senses the coherence, and your mind catches up only after the resonance has already been established. This sense of familiarity is one of the clearest signs of a shift, because it reveals that you are no longer navigating life from the perspective of the old self. You see yourself responding differently, choosing differently, moving differently, as if a wiser, more spacious version of you is now leading the way. You don't have to try to be this new version. You simply find yourself being it. And this naturalness is the clearest evidence that your energy field has rewritten its old patterns. As your vibration stabilizes, the external world begins to reorganize itself with eerie precision. Events that once seemed random begin aligning with your intentions. People show up at the exact moment you think of them. Opportunities unfold not because you chased them, but because they were already circling your new frequency, waiting for the field to become receptive. You find yourself in the right place at the right time without forcing, planning, or controlling. The universe begins coordinating in ways that are too delicate, too precise, too timely to dismiss. This coordination is not magic. It is physics. It is the natural consequence of resonance. When your inner field becomes coherent, the outer world cannot help but reflect that coherence back to you. Perhaps the most profound sign of all is when you begin to realize that you are no longer creating your life through effort, but allowing it to unfold through alignment. You stop trying to pull reality toward you like a heavy stone. Instead, your life begins to flow the way rivers do when they no longer fight gravity gently, effortlessly, with their own natural intelligence. You stop performing manifestation techniques out of desperation or fear. You stop trying to control outcomes. You stop negotiating with the universe. Instead, you sink into a deeper trust. A trust that comes from sensing the field, moving with you, not against you. This shift from creation to allowing is not passive, it is powerful. Allowing is the highest form of participation because it places you in partnership with the quantum field rather than in opposition to it. When you allow, you become a clear channel for the timeline that was already vibrating with your name. And the less you interfere, the more perfectly it aligns. So these signs, the synchronicities, the lightness in your heart, the familiarity with the unknown, the precise alignment of events, the deep sense of allowing are not random phenomena. They are the language of a recalibrated energy field. They are the whispers of a new timeline weaving itself into your life. And if you listen carefully, you will notice that each of these signs emerges not from force, but from surrender, not from effort, but from coherence, not from striving, but from becoming. The new reality is not something you chase. It is something you attune to. And when the attunement is complete, life shifts around you, the way a landscape shifts when the light changes subtly at first. Then unmistakably, until you no longer remember how the world looked through the eyes of the person you once were. You are the field that is rewriting itself. There is a moment, often so quiet, you barely notice it at first, when you begin to understand that everything you've been searching for has never been somewhere out there ahead of you. It has never been a distant timeline waiting at the end of a long road. Never a prize hidden behind the perfect technique. Never a secret reserved for the lucky or the chosen. As the layers of effort, fear, and striving slowly fall away, you begin to feel the deeper truth beneath every shift you have experienced. You do not run toward a new timeline. The new timeline comes toward you. The moment you change your frequency, reality has never been separate, never been static, never been indifferent. It has always been fluid, responsive, intimately entangled with the vibration of your consciousness. And when you tune yourself softly, sincerely, without force, the field reorganizes itself around you with a precision that feels almost sacred. At the deepest level, you are not a seeker wandering through a fragmented universe hoping to find connection. You are the point from which all connection emerges. You are the node of awareness through which the field expresses itself, learns itself, expands itself. The entanglement you feel with certain people, certain ideas, certain timelines is not accidental. It is the natural recognition that everything in this universe is built from the same fabric of information, and you are woven into it. The threads that bind you to your reality are not external. They are formed from your own consciousness. When you shift, the threads shift. When you soften, the field softens. When you awaken, the world around you rearranges itself to mirror the clarity you have allowed inside. And this realization does not come with fanfare. It comes with a quiet sense of awakening, a sense that the boundary between you and life has always been much thinner than you believed. Reality is not happening to you. You are participating in its unfolding through every breath, every feeling, every thought you allow to ripple through your field. You begin to see that the external world is not separate from your internal one, that your timeline is not something you chase, but something you align with through the vibration you embody. When you understand this, even for a moment, your relationship with existence changes. You stop fighting life. You stop negotiating with the universe. You begin to trust the subtle intelligence that has been guiding you, shaping you, whispering to you through synchronicities and sensations too delicate for words. And so, in these final moments, let your awareness settle gently into your body. Let your breath deepen without effort. Let your heart soften just enough to feel the truth that has been unfolding beneath every step of this journey. Right now, in this very breath, you are not trying to become someone new. You are giving permission for the brighter version of yourself, the one that has always existed in the field, to take its rightful place at the center of your life. Right now, the universe whispers, just breathe. Let your mind loosen its grip. Let your chest expand, as if remembering something ancient and familiar, and allow the more luminous version of you to step forward and live the next part of your story. Because life is not pushing you, life is inviting you. The field is not silent. It is responding to your every shift, and the timeline you seek is not distant. It is brushing against your awareness even now, recognizing your frequency, waiting for you to trust that you are ready. In the end, the truth is disarmingly simple. What you are searching for has already found you. It has been circling your field, waiting for coherence, waiting for softness, waiting for the moment. Your inner light quiets the noise of the old self. And now that your frequency has changed even slightly, it draws near. It knows you. It recognizes you. And it will meet you the moment you stop trying to reach for it and finally allow it to reach for you.